In March 1900, a British governor stood before Asante leaders in Kumasi and asked a question that revealed how little colonial power understood the nation it wanted to rule. Where, he demanded, was the Golden Stool, and why was he not sitting on it? To the British administration, the missing object looked like the final symbol of authority it had not captured. To the Asante, the stool was not furniture and not a royal trophy. It represented the spirit of the nation itself. The demand did not create resistance from nothing, but it turned occupation, exile, and anger into the flashpoint remembered as the War of the Golden Stool. The Asante state had grown in the forests of what is now Ghana through military power, trade, diplomacy, and a political system that connected many communities to Kumasi. Gold carried economic value, but gold also carried political meaning. Asante traditions describe the Golden Stool, Sika Dwa Kofi, as descending from the sky during the founding of the Confederacy. It was understood as a vessel for the nation's spirit. An Asantehene ruled in relation to the stool. He did not own it as personal property. That distinction matters. A foreign official could seize a palace chair and call it a throne. The Golden Stool represented something wider: continuity among the living, ancestors, leaders, and the political community. By 1900, Britain and Asante had already fought repeatedly. British forces had entered Kumasi in the 19th century, destroyed parts of the capital, and carried away royal objects. In 1896, Asantehene Prempeh I was arrested and sent into exile, eventually to the Seychelles. British officials expected that removing the king and controlling Kumasi would make Asante's sovereignty disappear. It did not. Political authority remained distributed among chiefs, queen mothers, councils, and the symbols that connected them. The Golden Stool had been hidden. Its survival meant that the British controlled territory without possessing the object through which they imagined final submission could be displayed. Governor Frederick Hodgson arrived in Kumasi in March 1900. According to the British military account preserved by the National Army Museum, he demanded the sacred stool and expected to sit upon it. The words were a diplomatic disaster, but responsible history must avoid the easy version in which one rude speech magically starts a war. Resistance was already being discussed. Prempeh remained in exile. British searches and demands pressed on existing questions of sovereignty. Hodgson's address supplied a public insult and a clear political signal. Colonial rule was not satisfied with administration. It wanted the central symbol of Asante nationhood placed beneath a British official. Why could a stool matter enough to fight over? Because objects can hold institutions. A national flag is cloth, a seal is metal, and a constitution is paper, yet attacking them can communicate an attack on the political order they embody. The Golden Stool worked on a deeper sacred level. It was not normally sat upon, even by the Asantehene. The ruler was associated with it while respecting its separate status. Hodgson's desire to sit on it therefore inverted the relationship. What he treated as proof of possession was understood as desecration. The misunderstanding was not a minor cultural mistake. It exposed a colonial assumption that every form of authority could be converted into a captured object and a visible ceremony of obedience. The resistance found its most famous leader in Yaa Asantewaa, the Queen Mother of Ejisu. Queen mothers in Asante politics were not decorative figures. They participated in selecting leaders, advising councils, and preserving the continuity of lineages and offices. The Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art describes Yaa Asantewaa taking command of the fighting force with support from remaining Asante leaders. Popular retellings often give her a dramatic speech challenging hesitant men to fight. The exact wording cannot be verified as a recording. The underlying decision is secure. She became a central organizer and military leader of the uprising, turning defense of the stool into resistance against colonial control. Asante forces encircled the British position at Kumasi. Hodgson, his wife, officials, soldiers, and other members of the colonial party were trapped inside the fort while food, medicine, and confidence declined. The siege changed the meaning of the governor's demand. The official who had arrived to demonstrate authority now depended on walls and relief from outside. In June, Hodgson's party broke out through hostile territory, leaving a smaller garrison behind. The Ghana Museums and Monuments Board preserves the fort as a military museum and a site connected to the Yaa Asantewaa War. The landscape itself still records the reversal. Colonial power had demanded submission, then found itself surrounded. Britain assembled a relief expedition under James Wilcox, using imperial forces recruited from several West African colonies. The column fought through difficult forest routes and reached Kumasi in early July, when the remaining garrison was close to collapse. Relief of the fort did not end the war. British units continued operations against Asante positions for months. The campaign illustrates how empire concentrated resources across colonies. Soldiers recruited in one African territory could be deployed to impose British control in another. It also shows why a simple story of Britain against a single queen is incomplete. The conflict joined Asante political networks, local fighters, colonial administrators, and African troops inside an imperial military system. The uprising was eventually defeated. Yaa Asantewaa and other leaders were captured and sent into exile in the Seychelles, where she died in 1921. Britain tightened its formal control over Asante. Judged only by territory and military outcome, the empire won. Yet the symbolic objective at the heart of Hodgson's demand was not fulfilled in the way he imagined. The Golden Stool remained an Asante national symbol rather than a British seat of rule. Prempeh later returned from exile, and Asante institutions continued within changing colonial and post-colonial arrangements. Military defeat did not erase the political meaning that had made resistance possible. The war reveals a recurring failure of conquest, confusing possession with legitimacy. British forces could occupy Kumasi, exile a ruler, collect regalia, and declare new legal authority. But legitimacy depended on relationships and meanings that could not be manufactured by sitting on a sacred object. The demand for the stool was intended to display completion. Instead, it showed incomprehension. That is why the episode remains larger than an unusual dispute over royal furniture. It asks who has the power to define what an object means. The governor believed the stool would certify British sovereignty. Asante resistance demonstrated that its meaning came from the nation that protected it. So the War of the Golden Stool was not caused by an object alone. It emerged from decades of conflict, the destruction of Kumasi, the exile of Prempeh, and the attempt to turn military occupation into unquestioned rule. But Hodgson's demand concentrated those pressures into one unmistakable image: a foreign governor asking to sit on the spirit of another nation. Yaa Asantewaa and the Asante resistance answered that image with war. Britain defeated the uprising and extended colonial control. It still failed to transform the Golden Stool into a trophy of submission. The strongest symbols survive not because they are made of precious material, but because a community refuses to let an occupier decide what they mean.